Mayor, you may proceed.
Max, we can start on time.
Yes, sir, you may proceed.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is Monday, November 15th, 2021. This is a virtual special meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. I'd like to call this meeting to order at exactly 2:00 p.m. Thank you for being here. With that, we'll start off with a roll call of commissioners. Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Gay.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Edward Chernowski. Here. And the Mayor Stan Mills. We have a full complement of the mayor and commissioner, so we are able to formally conduct business today. Thank you all for being here. I'd also like to introduce other attendees today: city staff, city manager Sharon Lynn, city solicitor Glenn Mandalis, Kevin Williams, our public works director, Evan Miller, projects coordinator, Bert Dukes, financial guru, Jeff Sturdivant with GHD, city's consultant to this project. And also we have, I'll have some other introductions as we move forward. Would like to thank everybody that's watching virtually. Let you know that you're also able to come in person to the Anchor Room, which is the Commissioner's Room. Also like to thank those that are here in person. And we will certainly look at calling on you to speak at the appropriate times. Also wanted to thank those that are registered to speak in advance. And those that aren't here and are registered to speak in advance include Suzanne Good, Donna Mabry, Jennifer Duncan, and Rick Perry. So thank you all again. I will call you all on you at appropriate times after calling on those that are in here in person. I'd like to also thank the county folks for being here. We'll introduce them shortly. Also like to remind everybody that support documents, when they are available, are embedded into the agenda. It's available at cityofrehoboth.com. Go to the legislative portal, the green box in the middle of the homepage, right side, and click on that, seek the meeting and the agenda, and you'll be able to see any documents that the commissioners are able to see as well. With that, I would like to remind people that on the legislative portal, there are specific files specific to this topic. There includes a folder, overall folder that says Sussex County Initiative to Purchase Outfall Capacity. And under that tab, there are other tabs for the November 4th communications from the public, and also a city presentation of November 4th, and another tab for public correspondence there. So you are able to access everything that we're able to access. With that, the correspondence that we received for this particular meeting comes from Joel and Nancy Fraden, Sturgis Dodge, Michael Strange, and Suzanne Good. And again, those are available to the public on the city's legislative portal under the Sussex County Initiative topic in public correspondence. Purpose of this special meeting today is to continue discussions of Sussex County's request to purchase a portion of the permitted daily average load allocation, which is an equivalent of 2 million gallons per day of the city's ocean outfall capacity. I would like to give you a little quick background here. The county first approached the city in June 2021 with a broad overview of their proposal. There was nothing presented in writing, and frankly, there was not enough details to judge the proposal. But we said we would await follow-up before taking it to the commissioners and the public. And then the second approach by the county was in early October with more details, but still not all the details. And I indicated that we would take it to the commissioners and to the public to gauge interest. If you recall, our first public meeting was on November 4th to introduce the subject. I had intended to bring it up again at the November 8th meeting and deferred on that. Today is really our second public meeting on this topic. This is the first meeting where the county was invited to participate. It's important for you to know, if it's not already obvious, that the request from Sussex County to purchase some of Rehoboth Beach's outfall capacity is not fully researched by the city or commissioners, and so the request is in a preliminary state. We came to the public as soon as possible to solicit public comment while we all still evaluate the request. We appreciate the county for attending today's meeting and participating. As a preface to today's agenda, please know that the county watched our first meeting, so they have a flavor of the questions and the comments. You'll recall that I solicited commissioner questions. I've forwarded them to the county, so they have a heads up. You will also recall I solicited questions from the public, and all incoming comments and public correspondence is put in that folder in the portal, as I mentioned earlier, and is accessible to all the public, including to the county. So again, the county has a heads up on how to prepare their presentation today. So on today's agenda, first, we're going to give the county time to give a presentation, including where they hopefully address some questions posed by the commissioners and the public at previous meeting. Then the commissioners can direct questions to the county, and then the public can direct questions to the county. Next, city staff will follow up on questions remaining from our first meeting, including questions and answers from the commission and the public. And then after the county and after city staff, then we can all engage in discussion among the commissioners, followed by public comment. My goals today are to allow for complete exploration of this proposal through your questions and comments so that at some point, everyone, elected officials, citizenry, et cetera, can make an informed decision about whether or not this proposal is good for the city and good for the citizens of the city of Rehoboth Beach. I do not expect the discussion to be concluded necessarily, but we'll see what comes out of this meeting and what kind of subsequent meetings we would need to have to continue this through conclusion. With that, I'd like to introduce the three speakers today from Sussex County government. Todd Lawson is a Sussex County executive. Hans Medlars is a Sussex County engineer. And Gina Jennings, the Sussex County Finance Director, will be talking to us. Todd Lawson is the one with no hair, and Hans Medlar is the one with gray hair. So you'll be able to tell who Gina is. Again, we thank you all for being here, and we turn the mic over to Sussex County. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the introduction, especially the references between myself and Hans and myself being follically challenged. You will definitely know the difference. I'm going to try to share my screen here and see if this works correctly. Let's see. Can you see the presentation? Not yet. All right. Stand by. There we go. All right. How's that?
There we go. Very good. Thank you, Todd.
Okay. Now let me get this out of the way so we can see everything. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, commissioners, for allowing us to present today. We have taken the information.
Let's see if we can get rid of the video there. There should be at the very top of that box a minus to minimize that. You might have to pull it down a little bit there, Todd. Evan Miller, you want to?
Yeah, go ahead, Evan, please.
There we go. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So again, thank you for the invitation. We did watch with interest, as the mayor referenced, the November 4th meeting and have taken the information that was communicated during that meeting, as well as the information forwarded to us to try to put together this PowerPoint, our goal today is to be as transparent as we can with the request that we're asking you to consider, and also to answer as thoroughly as we possibly can at this stage of this proposal. As the mayor did reference, we are at the preliminary stages of what we had hoped that the city would consider for us to help make some decisions along the way. We are at a juncture where within the county sewer operations, we're making multi-million-dollar improvements to 3 of our plants, and including the Wolfneck plant. And at this point, that's why we approached Rehoboth to see if there would be any consideration to this proposal, because we're at a crossroads. We need to make a decision. Are we going to spend the money here in Rehoboth, or are we going to spend the money at Wolfneck or Inland Bays? I know this proposal has probably brought some attention to the city and to the commissioners, maybe some unwanted attention. For that, we do apologize. But at some point, we had to bring this forward and ask for you to consider what the county would like to have you make a decision on. All right, so I'm going to move into our PowerPoint. I wanted to start with a history of the county and the city working together. This is not anything new for us. As most of you know, the city and the county have been involved in a wastewater agreement that dates all the way back to 1983, when the first agreement was made between both entities. And it's important to note that because in our view, from the county's perspective, we're coming at this as a partner, and we're hoping that we're received as partners. We're hoping that the commissioners and the public in general see us as just that. Along the way, we've evolved to the point where in August of 2017, we entered into the current agreement that was signed, and you can see a picture of the signing ceremony, quote unquote, there in Georgetown, where the current wastewater agreement was signed. And I would note that this was signed even before the award of our first contract for the construction of that project, which is important. It shows the county's commitment to this venture with the city. That agreement, as you probably all are aware of, calls for an allocation of 42% that could grow up to 50% for the county's sewer access in the agreement that we currently are operating under today. Fast forward from that August date, in July of 2018, the county was approached by the city to help finance upgrades in what we called Phase 2A, which was particularly focused on the electrical upgrades that were needed at the plant. The county agreed, as a good partner would, we agreed to finance that $6 million, 10 years at 0% interest. And then just under a year later, the county also agreed to finance an additional plant upgrade, this time related to the influent screen failure. The city was in a tight situation as it was, and we were able to offer $3 million to finance that project and include it in the upgrades at the plant. And then just over another year, the county financed the additional oxidation ditch failure for $1.6 million, same terms, 42 and 58% debt service split. All of this done with county dollars, freeing up some of the city's money, and also combined savings, because with the county's dollars, we were able to avoid wage rates. More cooperation through the current agreement, in the sense that both plants, our plant at the Inland Bays and the city's plant here, received a biosolid upgrade, and the integrated facility here in the city is being built or will be built. At the same time, the county's transporting that biosolid material from Rehoboth to Inland Bays, where we're treating it at our new plant. The city does pay for the prorated annual debt service on that, but the city is not paying for the operational costs that goes into our biosolids project and facility. I also want to reference, if you can see that little picture in the red star, that is the city's water tower and yard area. If you're familiar with the Route 1 ditch, or excuse me, Route 1 canal and the Route 1 bridge, the 2017 agreement called for a third connection point between the city and the county. We've made that connection point already. That was installed by the county. That connection point actually goes under the canal, runs into a pipe that's in the ground already, and creates a bidirectional connection that allows for the diversion of up to 25% average annual inflow from Rehoboth to the Wolfneck plant. That's in case an emergency happened at the city's plant. In other words, what that means is we could turn the directional flow of that pipe and run effluent from the city's plant back to the Wolfneck plant and preventing any kind of spillage in the Rehoboth facility. So this is an illustration of our cooperation, both present and previous, and the agreement that we're operating under. So let's talk about the proposal. Now, this is the proposal that the mayor referenced a minute ago, and we did have some preliminary discussions over the summer, and I'll go over that timeline in a minute. The proposal is pretty straightforward. The county wants to send treated wastewater from our upgraded, fully flow equalized Wolfneck Regional Wastewater Facility to the Rehoboth Ocean Outfall. Fully flow equalized, what's that mean? That means that flow is sitting in a storage lagoon already treated. It has flow that's adjustable. It can be turned on, it can be turned off, it can be turned up, it can be turned down. It's controlled by us. So it's not something that we absolutely have to have running at all times. That's important. The county is proposing to purchase 2/5 of the average daily pound-based waste load allocation under the city's Npds permit. That's equivalent to 2 million gallons per day of the ocean outfall's capacity, and we're proposing to pay $7.6 million for that. We're going to get into a lot more detail related to the permit and related to the financing in a minute. The county will design, permit, construct an effluent pipe connection of limited size, that's important, a limited 12-inch diameter pipe. In other words, that 12 inches is all we're asking for, and there's going to be no further expansion from that point. That's the perfect size pipe, my engineer tells me, to run 2 million gallons a day. It's going to be valve bidirectional. The new pipe will connect to the outfall pipe within the city at a yet-to-be-determined location. All of this final arrangement will need to be approved by the county council. We're touching on that because I know that was raised. Eventually, this proposal will come before the county council for their approval. They're obviously well aware that we're having these conversations, and they're well aware of the proposal that we've proffered this for. I'm going to introduce our Chief Operating Officer and Finance Director, Ms. Jeannie Jennings, who's going to go over this slide on finances.
Thank you, Todd. So the financial proposal, as you've heard, is $7.6 million. Where that comes up with is the entire ocean outfall project cost was $38.5 million. You have a hydraulic capacity of 10.1. You take the 38.5, divide by 10.1, you get the cost of $3.8 million. Since we're asking for 2 MGDs, times that by the 3.8, you do have the $7.6 million. And we are suggesting a one-time payment of the $7.6 million.
Okay, so the mayor referenced the timeline on how this has gotten to this point, and it is really preliminary, and we're trying to give as much detail as we can at this stage. There are still going to be some unanswered questions, obviously, related to DENREC's involvement. That's the way these things go, but we did want to offer to the city our proposal and get their feedback and eventually a decision. So we did approach the city back in June, first met with them and just had a conversation to describe where we were in the process of our other upgrades located at our other facilities. Again, we need to make a decision. Are we spending money at our inland bays and Wolfneck plants, or are we spending money in the town of Rehoboth to make that connection? Once that decision is made, we will move forward, and I'll explain what those options look like. So in July, we had a conversation with DENREC to make them aware of what we were discussing with the city. In August, the county, and when I mean the county, our county engineer, Mr. Medlars, continued conversations with DENREC. Eventually, in September, county and city staff, along with GHD, had a conversation regarding the plant treatment process limitations. And then finally, in October, we did have something that we could present to the city in writing, which we did. We had a meeting back then. I believe we have forwarded that proposal to the city staff, so anyone that would like to see what was provided at that meeting is free to do so. Okay, so now we're going to get into some of the responses based on either comments that were made in November or direct questions that were asked of the county through information we received from the city. Does the county know how much sewer capacity it needs long-term? Has the county planned for their sewer needs? I think this is a very important question, and in short, we can answer that, yes, we do. The county has conducted extensive planning to ensure it can meet its sewer needs. The county projects a 20-year sewer capacity need for our northern planning area. That's the Rehoboth area that we're talking about in North Route 1. The county has planned to meet this need by designing upgrades at our Wolfneck and Npds facilities costing $44 million over the next 4 years. That money is budgeted. We have it in our capital plan. We're prepared to move forward. All that planning is taking place over a number of years where we know exactly what we need related to our sewer services. In addition, the county's entered into agreements with Artesian Wastewater Resources, the Lewis Board of Public Works, and as well as the City of Rehoboth for additional wastewater treatment and flow diversion. What do I mean by flow diversion? We have connections with those public utilities to send sewer to them to be treated or to receive water from them, depending on the circumstances, so that we can diversify our flow. This is very important. We view sewer service as a public utility in the greater good sense, where that we can provide that service to both our customers and other customers, and these agreements are codified to reflect that. And that will allow us to meet our projected demands. It's also important that we emphasize the fact that we have other interconnections throughout the county, not just on the eastern side. We have agreements with the town of Ellendale and Georgetown. We just recently expanded in the western side of the county with agreements between Greenwood, Bridgeville, and Seaford, also serving the city of Blades. We have interconnection agreements in the other areas of the county with Artesian. We have a connection with the town of Selveville that is served by our South Coastal Outfall in Bethany. So these interconnections between other municipalities is not a new thing for the county. It's exactly the way that we've planned it, and it's being made so that we can handle our growth predictions. Next question, what factors for county growth were used to project the long-term impact? So we project out 20 years. Can't really go beyond 20-year projection without a reasonable amount of certainty. We do this on a regular basis. So annually, we have our average number of sewer connections that we receive within our system, and that's system-wide. I mean, we have over 70,000 customers currently in our sewer utility with all the systems that I just referenced. As I said, beyond 20 years, ultimate needs can't be reasonably predicted. However, with every DNREC permit that the county has, we're required to initiate capacity expansion when we hit our 80% point. So the permits are written in such so that when you are getting close to your permanent allowance, you have to be making plans with DNREC to ensure that you can meet demand. Next question, what other options will the county pursue if the city declines this request? What's the county's timeline? So as I referenced, we're undergoing a 20-year expansion project at our Inland Bays facility, as well as a project at our Wolfneck facility. Coincidentally, the same sewer service expansions happening at our South Coastal project, just referencing the fact that we are undergoing a significant planning and treatment expansion exercise at all three plants. The Rehoboth proposal provides the county additional options to diversify our flow between our facilities. If the Rehoboth option is declined, the county will pursue all our other options currently under DNREC permit review for our Inland Bays facility. We have several permits that we've already submitted to DNREC related to our Inland Bays facility. They're under review, and we expect to see them hopefully in the next month, if not the rest of 2022. And once we get those decisions on those permits, we'll know our better timeline. That brings us to the timeline with Rehoboth. We would consider, or we would ask that the Rehoboth would consider making a decision by the first quarter of 2022, which would be tied to the DNREC issuance of our Inland Bays permit that we have currently pending at the agency. Why doesn't the county build its own ocean outfall located at the Wolfneck facility? Many of you are familiar with our Wolfneck facility just up the road, in the land-based treatment facility that we have there. However, that type of consideration is something that the county won't consider. In 2017, we entered into an agreement with the city and extended our history of partnership to build this state-of-the-art ocean outfall we're talking about today. Both municipalities are, generally speaking, 50-50 partners in this facility. The Rehoboth Ocean Outfall will serve the needs of the city and the county for the next 50-plus years, while only using 33% of the average daily hydraulic design capacity for the outfall, meaning there's much more capacity to be used in the pipe. Building a second ocean outfall at that Wolfneck location to serve the same regional customer base doesn't make good financial and environmental sense. Okay, we're going to turn now to the permitting portion of PowerPoint, and for this technical aspect, I will invite our county engineer forward, Mr. Medlars.
Thank you, Todd, and good afternoon, Mayor and Council of Rehoboth Beach and citizens, and the ones listening out in the on the World Wide Web. So let me just pick up where our administrator talked about the planning, because he mentioned the North Planning Area. The North Planning Area is anything north of the Indian River, and includes obviously all of Rehoboth, includes Dewey, includes a lot of the areas we are dealing with. But the North Planning Area is not only served by the entities you see here, Rehoboth and the county, but there are several other entities. As a matter of fact, I had the opportunity to discuss that today with one of the citizens, and all the growth you see on Route 9 and the majority of the growth you see on Route 5 is not on county sewer. As a matter of fact, last year in 2020, the county had 2,080 new service connections, 2,080. 2/3 of these service connections happened south of the Indian River. The majority of the county's growth on the county system is in the southern planning area, not the northern planning area. We sort of lose sight of, I live in the northern planning area, and we lose sight of that. If you don't visit the greater Bethany area, you don't get a full appreciation of what really the full development is in Sussex County and where it goes versus where you perceive it going. So I wanted to sort of make that case so you all understand that we look at the 20-year picture, but we also dice it down further on where it goes and what's needed. Our improvements at the South Coastal facility represents that number we need for the next 20 years. So we're building more capacity at South Coastal than we actually would be building here when you look at it from that way. So let me start with what does the city's current NPDS permit allow? It allows the city to discharge 425 pounds of biological oxygen demand and total suspended solids per day. That's what it allows. That's not what the city does. As a matter of fact, Commissioner Gossett asked a question, why would we put more in than we currently do? All the modeling and all the underlying decisions to the permit were made on that number. They were made what happens if the city were to discharge 425 pounds. So the mixing, the dispersion, all of these decisions are based, all of the modeling is based on that number. So when we looked at what can the city facility and what could a future upgraded Wolfneck facility easily achieve in terms of concentrations, and that would be 10 parts per million. So if you had to share, and let me say the word share is only used in the sense of if you split this number, the 425, into different percentages. Like our administrator said, if the city were to retain 3/5 and the county were to obtain 2/5, and each party can easily meet the 10 parts per million limit, what kind of flow could we easily support? So that's how the 2 million gallons per day number was derived, which we then backed into the outfall capacity. When you look at the permitting, it would be a dual permit, which doesn't mean it's joint. No, it means everybody has their individual permit. Each entity has to meet their permit limits at a specific compliance point. Each entity is responsible for meeting that compliance point. If the entity does not meet the compliance point, the entity which has the violation would have to rectify that on their end. And they would have to deal with the permitting agency. In this case, obviously, it would be the NREC for both permits. So in order to even allow this to be considered by the NREC, that was a good bit of our discussions with them, was the fact that we would not increase the request beyond the modeled and tested limits under the studies. Hence, that's why there would be a reduction in concentration. If you look at the current permit, it has a 15 part per million limit. In order to allow the pounds to be distributed under 2 distinct and separate permits, you would have to meet a lower concentration limit. That is the 10 parts. So we believe both facilities can easily do this. As a matter of fact, the South Coastal facility easily meets that limit. The Rehoboth facility easily meets that limit. So again, in Commissioner Goss's question, we will certainly always perform at the technical limit of our facilities and not discharge any more pollutant than we have to discharge based on operating these facilities at the best level. So, in summary, maintaining the waste load allocations under a dual permitting, 2 distinct and separate permits, would allow that the modeling and studies can remain in place. Furthermore, because like our administrator said, we have a fully flow equalized facility which the county can shut on or off. The county is not asking for any of the max daily allocation. The entire max daily allocation would remain with the city. So if Super Sandy hits, the county would not be discharging, but the city would be utilizing the entire maximum daily allowed waste load quantity to be utilized. So that's a very important distinction. There is no other partner who could, for example, if you were to team up with the Lewis Board of Public Works, they could not make that commitment. They would want their share of the maximum daily waste load allocation because they don't have that luxury the county has at Wolfneck. So these are very important distinctions to be made. So let me hit the wrong button here. Thank you, Todd. Much appreciated. The question came up in various forms from the commissioner side, Mayor, from the constituent side, a couple of phone calls I received. Will we rescind the offer if there were nutrient limits versus the monitoring, and why would you make that statement? So let me first make the distinction, and your consultant, Mr. Sturdivant, has made that distinction previously, and your trusted Public Works Director and my dear friend, Mr. Williams, because we're partners, I say this, and we're friends. Currently, the city permit does not have a nutrient limit. It has a requirement that you monitor your nutrients, and it has a requirement that you report your nutrients. That is a clear distinction. If the permit were renewed as is with just the nutrient monitoring and reporting, whether I agree with it or not, that would not make a difference to the county. However, if the new permit would switch from a monitoring requirement to a meet the limit requirement, the county would have to rescind the offer and walk away. And that's for one reason and one simple reason. Upgrades to the Wolfneck facility would include tertiary treatment, i.e. filtration, which we can easily accomplish, where we can then meet the other permit limits. No, I can't say this because the nutrients are no permit limits. We can meet the permit limits, BOD, TSS, and Enterococcus bacteria, and we would not have to change our treatment process other than add tertiary treatment. Keep in mind, that facility will almost always and utmost be a land treatment system. There will always 300 plus acres to be sprayed on, almost 400 with the addition out front. And when you spray on a land treatment system, you do not have nutrient removal because the land treatment system inherently balances the uptake of the crop with the nutrients you have in your water. So there's no reason to do so. The South Coastal and Rehoboth facilities happen to have nutrient removal because they employ a biological nutrient removal process. I'll get into this a little bit later. So if the Wolfneck facility had to install nutrient removal in addition to the filtration, that would have to come in a undesirable process, which is called denitrifying filters. So they come with operational expenses, they come with difficulties in operating, and they have some other challenges by having to use methanol. So these are all not desirable side effects for something the county would not need. So it would drive up our capital cost, it would drive up our operational cost, it drive up our operator requirements, and at that point, it would make no sense for us to do so. So having said that, I hope we answered that question sufficiently. So this is a question for the county engineer just because I happen to know the answer, but it can also be a question for our city team members and our consultants. If the nutrient monitoring requirements were removed from the new city permit, would the city process change? You remember I talked about your system is a nitrification, denitrification process. And for the facility to perform at its optimum, it actually takes advantage of the denitrification. And it's fascinating to me, probably not to the majority of the listeners, but the denitrification frees up oxygen, which otherwise you would have to introduce by mechanical means, which would cost you money. So you would, of course, continue to do your denitrification process. So the city's B&R process would remain unchanged for not the reasons because you want to put less nutrients in the water, no, because that's the most economical process you have. So why would you not change you would not tear down two brand new rehabbed oxidation ditches, not brand new, but brand new mechanical parts, and select another process. It would make no sense. So that's why the answer to this is a categorical no in the county engineer's opinion. Did either one of you gentlemen want to add something to that answer? Declined. Okay, we'll move on. Does the city's current NPDS permit allow for splitting of the daily average waste load allocation? And have we reached out to gauge the support on the waste load allocation, and was the city part of the discussion? We combined a number of questions into this sort of overarching question. And let me say, the city was part of the request to engage with DNREC. That was very early on. The administrator pointed to that because we had to ask for your permission to engage DNREC with the question because it's the city's permit, not the county's permit. It's like, I don't want you, the city, to go to DNREC to discuss the Wolfneck permit. I'd like to at least know about it. once you tell me why you want to do this, I'll be happy to agree. But we had to ask the city their concurrence for us to approach DNREC. So that was that very early on interaction. So with that in hand, we did, and the we is in this case, our administrator and our president and the county engineer approached DNREC initially at a very high level, and later on, like Todd said, at a very technical, because once we stepped it down from the very high level, it was handed over to the technical team at DNREC. And you have seen in the original handout, which was handed out October 5th, the email I sent to the technical team, which essentially reiterates the discussions I had with the technical team, because the DNREC technical team says, you have to make a presentation, or you have to make a case where you do not increase any waste load allocation requests. You have to live within that 425 pounds. Hence, that's why it was all structured that way. That was structured based on DNREC feedback, not their concurrence, not their approval, just a general 20,000 foot level feedback. So as you see in my email, it says very carefully, and that's exactly the point, do you have any reasons for us to discuss it with the city at this level for this, under this approach? That's how the offer came about. So it's not something at our initial meeting where we sat down for the first time with city team, the mayor and the city staff. At that point, we did not talk about a waste load allocation split. We talked strictly about how about selling part of the outfall capacity. The refinement of that came during our discussions with DNREC. So, as you can see, if you have these high-level discussions with the department, that is somewhat, you can't blow this up and bring 20 people to the meeting. These are very detailed discussions, and initially at a very high political level, and then at a very limited technical level. There's like literally a handful of people discussing how this could even look like, if at all submitted. So I wanted to put these various questions to the, I shouldn't say to rest, I'm sure there's some follow-up questions which we have on that.
Hans, let me insert in there. You mentioned the October 5th documents. I would direct the city secretary to, that we'll send her those October 5th documents to put them on the portal along with this presentation. So they're not yet on there, but those will be on there available to the public. Thank you, Hans.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the clarification. So why not wait till the current NPDS permit is renewed? Your permit will expire in about 7.5 months now. You will be filing, your consultant and the city team will be filing the renewal application within the next 4 or 5 weeks. Is that right timeline? Yes. So the renewal process can take a significant amount of time. And especially based on the ask, based on the meritorious comments received by the department, based on what public hearings will be scheduled, based on the input during the public hearings. So it is not unusual to have permits which are administratively extended beyond their permit expiration date. And we all know that well. And so if the city has a new permit by the expiration of the current permit, that would be great. And that would be sometime in the middle of next year. So if we waited for this very, let's call it, positive thinking timeline, nothing would happen for 6 to 7 to 8 months at a minimum. Like the administrator said earlier, in Q1 of 2022, we have reason to believe a series of Sussex County's permits will go to notice, which means all you see, they will be noticed in the newspaper, and then anybody and everybody can make meritorious comments on the process. The NRC will review these comments, and depending on the comments received, schedule a public hearing or numerous public hearings. Just to give you a flair for it, we currently have 8 permits pending before the state. I have made the request repeatedly, and the state agreed, that all these permits, because they're linked, would go to notice together. Because if they don't, it creates confusion in the public. So, and you could ask, why are they not all under one permit? Because the state regulations deal with operations differently than construction. They deal with pipeline work differently than treatment plant work. They deal with biosolids work differently than treatment. I mean, there are all these different nuances under what regulation and what subset of regulations you submit something. So that's why there is a series of different permits pending. For example, the ag operation of spray is permitted separately than if we spray on permitted land. So if you look at this, there are literally 8 permits there just for inland bays, not counting the ones for Wolfneck. So this will hopefully wrap up in Q1, and then, like Ms. Jennings said, that's when it is decision time. Because the design's done, we have to, at that point, advertise contracts. So at that point, the county will be making decisions, and we would like to make these decisions with all the options on the table. So if I slip here, I hit this one. So what is the timeline for us, for the county, to get the necessary infrastructure approved? And keep in mind, it does not say built, it's approved. So when you look at, again, the same series of permits I talked about earlier would have to apply. We would have to have 2 Wolfneck permits we need to deal with, in addition to the spray irrigation conversion permit currently pending. It would be the one adding the tertiary treatment. It would be the one changing part of the effluent from land treatment to an Npds. So there would be an operational permit involved. There would be a land treatment permit modification involved. There would be a construction permit involved. There would be a city Npds permit modification involved, but that would only happen subsequent because of the waste load transfer. So there is a construction permit required for the pipe to go from point A to point B. There are federal permits required to cross under the canal. If we get this done in 3 to 4 years, I would say we did a good job. So that's why it makes perfect sense to look at this and tie the whole thing to where we stand at inland bays versus waiting around for a year and not proceed on something which takes 4 years. So I venture to say that the city permit is very close to renewal by the time we get the other issues wrapped up. So at that point, it would look at a modification versus a renewal, obviously. But I want to sort of give the commissioners and the public a flair for how long these things take. This is not something which takes months. It's measured in years. And nobody knows that better than gentlemen in the audience.
Hans, before you go, you mentioned, if you look at the title of that last slide, please. The way I read it, what is the timeline for the county to build the necessary infrastructure if the proposal is approved? If I heard you correctly, you said this has nothing to do with build, it has to do with permitting. Does this?
The question was build. I did not answer the build question because I can't answer it.
Okay.
So that's why I made the distinction. I did not want to think that there were several people who asked how long does it take to build it. once you have all the permitting, the right-of-way acquisitions and everything in place, the building is the easy part, believe it or not.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
No, I'm glad you sort of brought that distinction out one more time. So the citizens and the commissioners asked the build question, but I do not feel comfortable answering the build question before I even have a permit in hand. Are we good on that, Mayor?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Will this proposal affect the actual outfall pumps the city has, the pipe itself, and the diffuser assembly? And Mr. Sturdivant and I certainly had a number of discussions on this, and we were looking at the various scenarios, and GHD is an excellent company, and they will never shoot off the hip like the county engineer tends to do sometimes. And that doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about. That's why I'm making that comment. So I spent a little bit of time checking and looking what I believe would be the differential in pressure the city's pump station would be facing. And I had shared with GHD the number, I believed it to be 3 PSI. I was very pleased to hear that the sophisticated model which GHD applies validated my 1 hour evaluation within less than 15%. So I believe, and I think now GHD would second me on this, that it will not adversely affect the current configuration of the pumping station. However, in the unlikely event that this would be the case, that we were both wrong, we can make the unequivocal statement, if it is necessary, the county's project would cover the upgrades necessary to the city's pump system. So that way, if somebody says, oh, these two gentlemen need a third party to check them, maybe we can just put that to rest by saying we believe it is such an unlikely event that we, the county, can commit to the upgrades if they are necessary. Jeff, you want to add anything to that?
Just that I think that we had that
Jeff, you've got to pull that microphone to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor. Just that we had this question, and I think this is the resolution to it, is that the pumping system there has plenty of capacity, and that we will be able to adjust it to meet this additional flow if the city so chooses to do that. So.
Thanks, Jeff. Ms. Jennings will take over.
Just for a couple more slides, give Hans a break. So how will the county's contribution exactly affect the city's sewer debt and the county's repayment? So the $7.6 million, again, is just one-time payment. It will not be a debt buy-down. We will still continue to pay the 42% of the outfall debt. And if we go up to 50%, which our agreement allows, we will then pay 50% of that debt. So this $7.6 million is, once we've cut the check, the city can decide how they want to spend that $7.6 million. And then eligible future debt incurred under phase 3 and 4 would also be shared per the agreement. So if we take on more debt, we'll again pick up the percentage. Just 7.6 will not exempt us from future debt. What are the outfall operational and maintenance cost savings to the city? So there is some maintenance cost to the outfall. It is not much compared to a whole wastewater treatment plant, but if we increase how much we're using the outfall, we will pay for these extra costs that are in the outfall. Inspections, studies, any repair, something happens to the outfall pipe. So we will increase that. That will save the city some of the maintenance costs that they will see in the future. I'm going to turn it back over to Hans.
Well, that was a short break.
I know, you had a little break, sorry.
So it's a question which was answered by the 3 gentlemen in the room jointly. It was between Mr. Williams, Mr. Sturtevant, and myself. We sort of did some brainstorming. How could the city increase its sewer need? So, in short, the city has not conducted a planning study where they're looking at what would be the ultimate build out under various zoning scenarios. So, however, we have all concluded that the city is discharging and nowhere near even the 3/5 mark we are currently targeting. So if you were to consider the proposal, then you could commission a study to look at the various zoning scenarios, height restrictions, etc., and determine whether you feel that the 60% of 425 pounds waste load allocation would be adequate or not. As we see it today, Mayor and Council, the three gentlemen before you believe there is sufficient capacity under any scenarios we could think of, which are, which would not drastically change the look and feel of the city of Rehoboth. So it's a tricky question because it requires that crystal ball, and so like we sort of brainstormed, as I said, what would affect it the most and how much would it be? So the citizens I spoke with, and that's two different ones, said, what would happen if the entire city becomes non-resident and everybody rents out their house on a weekly basis? That's a pretty extreme scenario, and that would probably double what you have today. So you would go from a 10% to a 20%. So even that scenario, as extreme as it sounds, is not going to significantly change the baseline. You have to go way beyond that to significantly change the baseline. I think one of the commissioners listed a couple of the projects you're looking at. I think it was a hotel and some modifications. I think it was Commissioner Gossett who listed a couple of items. None of these are even in the move the needle, because when you look at how much they flow compared to what our millions of gallons coming in, the percentage increases are not moving the needle on that question. But again, it's up to your decision, Commissioner's decision, to see whether you would like to have, that subject studied further. Mayor, you want to chime in on that, or should I continue?
No, that's fine.
How will the piping be configured to serve an emergency connection between the city and the Wolfneck plant? It's a great technical question. I actually very much enjoyed answering it. But the easiest way to connect two pipes is what we call a wet tap. However, that would not allow this to happen. So a more complex connection has to be thought after, and that would be involving what we call flow-through bypass arrangement. And I don't like to go into details, but I've done a dozen or more of these in my career, and they're very challenging, but they're also very interesting to design and construct. So we're committed to install the necessary valving in a project, and that's an additional expense, to allow the diversion. So you could cut the ocean flow off, valve it over to Wolfneck on both sides, we need valving, dispose of it in the lagoon, continue the flow until the city facility is fully functional, increase the city disinfection, continue to monitor the bacteria levels in the water coming to the Wolfneck facility, and only change the flow back to the ocean outfall if the bacteria levels meet the requirement. And then when you think backwards, i.e. upstream, at that point, the discharge point going to Wolfneck will already have experienced that better level of disinfection longer than before we see it. That means at that point, you can change the valving back and you continue the ocean discharge. So this could be a day, this could be 2 days, this could be a week. we feel confident that we could go beyond a week. So that's a long time for improvements to be made without affecting your permit. Because all of a sudden, if you did not have that option, as benign as it sounds, you would incur a violation every day because you'd be in permit violation because you'd be discharging. So this would allow you to stop this. On the effluent side, which means the entire facility, given up to, and we could probably push backwards to the limited pipe with the higher pressure pumps we have here, about up to 3 MGD. If we were experiencing flows above 3 MGD, we would be very hard pressed to get it through a 12-inch pipe. Remember, we initially said we will commit to a lower pipe, to a smaller diameter pipe, because we do not see the need for a larger pipe. But if the city team came back and said, you know, guys, maybe under this scenario, we would like to see a 14, then that needs to be a discussion point. But we are perfectly willing and able to commit ourselves to a smaller pipe. But this warrants more discussion, but that's not discussion on our end, that's discussion on the city's end. Jeff, you want to chime in on that?
No, I'm in agreement. I just, my experience in my career has been that treatment plant operators like as much flexibility when it comes to meeting permit as they can. And so I think whenever there's an opportunity for flexibility, it's something that a utility should consider.
Retain the 12-inch pipe or go larger?
Both, but just the ability to pump the I guess permitted flow, or the part of the flow that if the plant had, say, a biological upset and we were not able to meet our permit, we would still run it through the treatment process, through the filters, but it wouldn't be in approval with the permit. So we would turn the valve and call the county and pump it to the county's facility for storage in their lagoon for them to retreat at a later moment or a later time until we get the treatment process up and running at the city. And at that time, we would shut the valve and start going back to the outfall. Every operator that I've ever worked with has always liked the flexibility to divert flow when they run into a jam, whether it's a power outage, whether it's a biological process upset, or a pipe break. So.
Thank you, Jeff. Hans?
Moving on to the next question. How will Rehoboth, the city, not be liable for anything the county sends to the outfall which does not meet permit? So let me start with ever since the inception of the South Coastal facility, there were 2 permits, 2 compliance points using that outfall. One was the town of Selveville, and one was South Coastal. Now, you may think the town of Selveville is insignificant, but keep in mind that the town of Selveville has a chicken plant within its city limits. The town of Selveville's average daily flow is very similar to the city of Rehoboth, if not higher. So we have, for 37 years, operated at South Coastal a dual, independently permitted, separate compliance point system using one pipe. Now, were there days, were there instances where Selveville incurred a violation? Yes. Were there instances where the South Coastal facility in 37 years incurred a violation? Yes. Did they ever affect each other? Absolutely not. So in that world, when you have 2 compliance points, 2 permits, and 2 facilities who independently report and are responsible for their permit and their performance, that there is a long history of that within the state of Delaware, which is important. Now, again, let me point out what I said before, because we have the ability to stop. We have the ability to actually pre-test. If we have any reason to believe the counties water does not meet permit, i.e. more than 10 parts per million, we can stop discharging before it occurs. I've been in this business for over 40 years. I never had that luxury. That's almost unheard of. You have the ability to not incur a violation. I think that's great. I like that idea. So we can easily say, we feel we will be in compliance with our permit because we have the ability to do that without, like I'm always a little bit envious of industrial discharge permits because financial decisions aside, industrial facilities have one up on municipals. They can stop the flow. Municipals can't. The flow keeps coming whether we like it or not. So that is for the first time as the county engineer would have a facility where you can stop the flow if you have an issue. So that's why the entire max allocation would be retained by the city. So you could still using 20 parts per million concentration, and I think all three technical experts in this room agree Rehoboth under any circumstance should be meeting 20 ppm. So there's really no reason for us to believe that would not be the case. Did you want to add anything to that?
I would state that, the maximum is there in the permit for utilities to have some flexibility when they do have a process upset or an issue at the plant. So that's what the regulatory agency installs that for. And so typically, the city of Rehoboth Beach is not needed to go all the way up to, I think it's 23 parts per million for BOD or TSS. However, there could be an event where we go above that and it's a violation. Maybe we have something occur at the facility that was unplanned. But other than that, on a typical basis, we are well below 5 milligrams per liter in TSS or BOD. So the performance there is on a 99 percentile right there at the lowest points.
Thank you, Jeff. Hans?
The climate change question has been coming up more and more frequently over the last few years, rightfully so, in my opinion. And we take it very seriously, and both entities should take it very seriously because we both serve collection areas which are relatively low-lying areas which are subject to flooding. And this is not rainfall flooding, this is bay water flooding, brackish water flooding, high chloride level water flooding. And regardless of how tight your collection systems are, you will have significant infiltration, which means you will end up with a high chloride concentration entering your facility. If you are discharging on a land treatment-based system, land treatment-based systems do not like chlorides because they rely on spraying the water on living plants. And most of the crops, no, all of the crops we grow and the trees we spray on, pines are very sensitive to chloride levels, believe it or not. We're spraying on pines in Piney Neck. So that means we prefer to not be as sensitive to chloride levels in the future. As you can imagine, the ocean has chloride levels in the 10,000 plus. So chloride is not a problem discharging in the ocean. So for that reason and that reason alone, it is very important to us to have options available which are not chloride sensitive. Secondly, we believe the Wolfneck facility, and you heard the administrator say 50 years. We're using 50 years because 3 years ago, we signed the lease agreement with the state of Delaware, which is a 25-year and a 25-year. It is a 50-year lease. And we expect to be spraying in Wolfneck over the 50 years. We have the right to do so. The facility is planned to be in existence. and that facility will not go away. Sea level rise. We are obviously right next to the marsh. I checked our spray fields and looked at the design records, looked at all the elevations which are on our design drawings. The fields we're using, the agricultural fields, are between 10 and 20 feet plus above mean sea level. So even when the marshes are more often submerged, the spray fields are not affected. And I'm saying this, I hope I will not, or I hope our children will not see 10 feet sea level rise, because at that point we have much bigger problems. But I believe that the Wolfneck facility is a viable facility based on just the sheer topography and our investments and our leases. So the county is committed to operate that facility for that timeline. Remember that we have the seasonal flow.
Good news. This is the last slide. I want to thank Hans and Gina for their presentation and information. Like I said, we did try to cover everything that we heard during the meeting or received afterwards. This is the last question. Is the county sending wastewater from West Rehoboth customers to the Rehoboth plant instead of the Wolfeneck facility today? The answer is yes. Remember slide 3 when I referenced the canal as a ditch, or the bridge over Route 1 and the water tower? That's the same connection point. So per the 2017 agreement, the county made that interconnection to the Rehoboth plant in that area. This is what we call our pump station 202 catchment area, which is the map in yellow. Those customers are the customers that are flowing through that interconnection, and that sewage is going over to the Rehoboth plant and being treated at the plant and then disposed of through the ocean outfall. This connection accounts for 300 to 400,000 gallons, 300,000 to 400,000 gallons per day during the season, and those are summer season numbers. We just recently checked the numbers post-summer, and now we are under 200,000 gallons per day in the same catchment area with those new numbers. This additional flow, of course, is part of the agreement, so with additional flow comes additional county operation payments to the city. Okay, Mr. Mayor, I think that captures it in 24 slides. We stand ready for any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Evan Miller, you might need to give them a hand. What I'd like to do is take down the slide sharing so that we can see some faces here. But if they make reference to them again, then I'd like to slide share again and go to that slide if you can. If you need help, let us know. We'll be glad to help you. With that, I'd like to go to the commissioners to direct questions to any of the county folks here. And then we'll go to the public to direct questions to the county folks. What I'd like to do is remind you that what I'm seeking are questions during this segment, questions rather than opinions. If anybody has to go or they're time limited and you need to give your opinion, then that's fine. But otherwise, I'm trying to leave the opinions after questions are posed, additional questions are posed and responded to, so that we can all get a better understanding of the educational component here, if you will. With that, we'll go to the commissioners first. Is there anybody that would like to speak before we go to the public? Come
One
on.
question. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Commissioner Gossett here. A couple of questions, if I may. It was noted that there was a written proposal in October that was shared. I have not seen a copy of that. Maybe it ended up in my spam folder or something, but was a copy of the October written proposal shared with the commissioners?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't classify it as a proposal, but it was a handout, and I referenced that earlier, that no, that's not online yet, and we will put that online. We'll also distribute it to the commissioners after this meeting, but we want to have that available to all the public.
And a little more clarification, and I'm not sure which side this should come from, but the phrase was used when we talked about the permit that the permitting was also the phrase used, associated special conditions that are outlined in the permit. Can anybody kind of highlight what that means or how that could be interpreted?
Do you have a slide number by any chance?
I don't,
Okay.
sorry.
Commissioner, every permit the state issues has general conditions and special conditions. And the special conditions are quite varied. I happen to know one of the special conditions the city's NPDS permit had was that you had to have plant-wide power generation backup available to you by a certain date. That was a big special condition on the city permit.
Right.
The city permit also has special condition 13, which is the monitoring of the nutrients. That is a special condition. That comes in not as a general, not as a permit condition. It's a special condition which can be removed, altered, and or new special conditions added. So as I said, I have not seen in all these years in permitting in Delaware a permit issued without special conditions. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. And just also, if you could confirm for me your comparison of South Coastal and Selveville. Does Selveville, I'm not familiar with this, but does Selveville operate their own wastewater treatment facilities?
Yes, Selveville has their own wastewater treatment plant, always did, and still does.
So there is a model, if you will, for parallel permits being issued by DENREC?
There is a model for two entities having distinct, separate NPDS permits sharing a pipe. That's really what it is. The compliance point, Commissioner, is prior to the sharing. So everybody has to meet their compliance before they can share.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So Hans, just clarify, so the Selveville South Coastal Partnership is almost exactly like what we have, right? They have a wastewater treatment plant and they are sending to the county their treated effluent. So it's
Yes.
similar situation here. Very good.
It's identical, yeah.
Okay, very good. Any other commissioner questions? Commissioner Sharp, please.
I just have one quick clarification. I think I heard the term preliminary phase used a couple of times, and I think I understand that, but at the same time, am I incorrect that there is a need for the city to make decisions by December 31st, or does that go into 2022?
Hi, Commissioner. Thank you for that question. I do believe at the previous presentation, there was conversation related to a decision by the city by the end of this year, calendar year 21. We took that reference and we have clarified that with what I said today. We're looking for something in first quarter of next year that falls in line with our planning process that's ongoing at our other plants. So as Hans referenced earlier, we need to make a decision on where we're going to spend the funds. Is it here or is it there? So does that clarify?
It does. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody, other commissioners before we go to the public? Commissioner Gay, please.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. First of all, thank you for the extensive Q&A. I appreciate having that, as I've been asked many of those questions by our constituents. The interesting thing, I thought about the last slide on the West Rehoboth use. That's actually something I understand it was per the agreement signed in 2017, but until the first meeting on this project, I didn't know that that was actually happening, and I'm not sure anyone did. I understand the range of use of it, 100,000 gallons to maybe in the high season as much as 400,000. Do you know what then the current percentage of the county's use of our system was? It was 42, so I take it it's more than that now? Is it at the 50% of your limit or something between the two?
If you look at the, thank you, Commissioner, for your question. Did you have a chance to read the agreement?
I have not reread the agreement, no, so I haven't read it in a while.
Because
yeah, I know you can do up to 50%. I do remember that.
No, I'm asking the question because the debt allocations are where-based and will be based on annual reconciliations. So these are much, much more long-term flows. The percentage allocation which is allowed for the county to be used is 42% of plant capacity. So
Okay.
the county could flow up to today of 1.5 million gallons per day to the city and be within the agreement number. We believe over the next few years, if we do not have any arrangements on the outfall side, we would continue to increase our raw wastewater flow to the city's facility to that 50% mark, which would then bring it up to like the 1 3/4 range. But keep in mind, the agreement looks at debt service allocation differently than operational and maintenance charge numbers, which are based on daily influence. Does that answer the question before I sit back down? No.
I think so. Yeah, I have actually one other one, and again, there was a lot of information presented to us, so I may have some of this wrong. But you talked about making a 20-year projection of the use in this vicinity, but then you also talked about how the facilities would serve the area for 50 years, and you have a 50-year lease with the state. So I guess I'm just wondering why you didn't look at ultimate build outs over a 50-year period instead of just a 20-year period.
I believe in my engineering abilities, but I do not believe in anything beyond 20 years. Okay. So as long as I'm the county engineer, I will not try to speculate on this. I see people do this in comprehensive plans, and it always looks awkward because it is absolute crystal balling. It's not associated with real sound engineering principles. So if I'm allowed to dodge that question, I will please do so. Now, but you did ask another question earlier, which I did dodge, and not intentionally, but the administrator reminded me. Today, with the West Rehoboth contribution, the city is probably utilizing 40, maybe not quite 40% yet, but we're getting very close to our 40% mark of the design capacity of the facility, which would be, in our case, 1.5 MGD. But keep in mind, if you, again, hopefully do have a chance to read the agreement, it's actually in the city's best interest to have higher contributions on the raw wastewater side as well, because that changes how the actual O&M expenses are paid for. And Mr. Dukes is shaking his head because he knows it and Ms. Jennings know it. So we are on the receiving end of the bills, and he is on the he's on the money receiving end. So we both know how the agreement works, and we certainly that was structured on purpose that way in order to make it beneficial for both parties.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions from commissioners? If not, then we'll go to the public. We can come back to the commissioners, but let's go to the members of the public. We're going to start in order of those that are in the room with us, and then we'll go in order of those that pre-registered to speak. The agenda normally says that there's a 3-minute time limit. I'm going to allow probably double that, but be aware there are some time constraints here. And again, I'm seeking questions that'll help educate us all rather than opinions. Want opinions that we will absolutely accept later in the meeting. But again, if you have to leave, you're time limited, then certainly share your opinion. With that, Walter Brittingham. Nothing. Thank you, Walter. Mike Strange, please. Kevin, would you make sure that that's on? Yeah, we could do that. Mike, if you don't mind, let's use the podium if that's all right. And you'll be caught on the county's camera there.
Okay, very
so
good.
We can see you.
Does it work now?
You're good,
Okay.
thank you.
Mike Strange, Forest Oakley, and I'm here as a citizen, not as a member of the Planning Commission. What I'm saying doesn't represent that. And I just have two questions. One, with regard to the sea level rise, since this pipe has an expected life now, what's left of about 70 years, is what level of sea level rise did you use in the calculations to do that? And the second one is, with regard to Wolfneck, with regard to climate change, how far did you take out in terms of the inundation potential that it can survive and the number of days per month that the function will be non-functional in light of the climate change, and in the last 5 or 6 years, it's happening at an accelerating rate with regard to inundation?
Thank you, Mike.
We have been looking at all of our facilities with a 3-foot sea level rise phenomenon. And so we do not look beyond that for that particular one. And I don't know what you mean in the inundation of the facility. I mean, like the spray fields are well above any anticipated sea level rise. And pardon me? The climate change part. I accept the first part of what you said. The climate change part is, you know, like we see increased precipitation events, but I do not see a significant change in the annual participation numbers. So having said that, is land treatment-based systems live and die by annual numbers, because we have many, many days of storage which allow for the fluctuations to be handled. So we do better in large storm events which have, let's put Harvey aside. If you have 35 inches or 39 inches in 3 days, neither the city nor the county will do well. We will all be suffering. But in higher storm events, which let's say have downpours of inches per hour, 2 inches per hour, our facilities probably do better than a city in an urban environment where you have more potential inflow sources. So because we have a much more rural catchment area than the city, so I believe our inflow portion of that kind of event is probably not as severe as the cities or big cities. I happen to be familiar with Wilmington's, and they have a significant response. So does Dover, because I'm very familiar with Dover, running the Kent County Engineering Department for many years. So the Sussex County system is not as responsive, and that's a good thing not to be responsive to high precipitation events. So I'm not that much concerned about it. These are more difficult for us from a sediment standpoint because they do wash sediments off the field. So we have, as part of the project Mr. Lawson referred to, is a significant drainage improvement to the inland base fields to catch that in a series of biofiltration swales. So we are anticipating it, but I believe we are well prepared for it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Hans. With that, we'll go to Sam Cooper.
Oh,
Go ahead. If you want to be on camera, you go over there. If
I don't want to be on
want
camera.
anonymity, then
I want
somewhat.
Hans to be on camera. Question for Hans. I think or the county executive. You mentioned the South Coastal several times, and that you've increased the capacity down there, and you're going to be increasing the capacity down there. Are you doing that within the waste allocate? Have you done that, and will you be doing that within the waste load allocations that you've been assigned within the permits, both previous and today?
Sam, I really appreciate the question, and I'm not leading the witness. This is actually, the county did request and the county did receive an increase in waste load allocation in the last permit based on our continued growth. So getting an increased waste load allocation through the department with the proper improvements to the facility is not that heavy of a lift. That lift did not go to public hearing. there were no meritorious comments received on that permit modification, and the county has to-
The thrust of my question is, do you have whatever you were permitted capacity times, I assume you have the same 15 parts per million?
We have a less stringent limit at the South Coastal.
More than 15 parts per million?
No. We have more pounds available to us because our flow rate is much higher.
No, I'm talking about concentration.
Concentrations are the same, Sam. Yeah.
Concentrate. So in order to increase the flow at South Coastal, you haven't reduced your waste load allocation permit. You've increased it. My point is you're asking the city to do something you haven't done yourself.
No, we actually increased. We have more pounds than we had 5 years ago. We kept the same concentration, but the state in the new permit issued us additional pounds based on more anticipated flow over the 5-year permit cycle.
But that's my point, is though you've increased your flow and you've increased your the poundage.
Yes.
Here you're asking the city to cut its poundage to give some of it to the county.
That's correct.
Why aren't we asking to increase it by whatever the county needs?
If you recall that the discussions with the department, the NRC that is, the department said, initially we started from that premise. Hey, how about we want 2 million gallons, we can easily meet 15, 2 million times 15, you can do the math. So initially we started asking, hey, we'd like to have another 150 pounds. But the suggestion from the department was, if you did that, then you start the whole study process over again, because all the mixing and the studies were based on that number. So when we say we want another 150 pounds, now you're extending the timelines even beyond, what I expect the 3 to 4 years are.
Okay, I think you've answered my question.
Yeah, we initially said to the department, we'd like to have 150 pounds. The department thought about it. Their feedback was, hey guys, why don't you reduce your concentration? Stay within the limits, leave all the studies in place, and that way there is a better understanding for the public that we're not increasing our waste load allocation. So it is.
But you haven't done that at South Coastal. You've done exactly the opposite.
I have done the opposite because nobody had any objections to doing that.
Okay. I guess a comment related to Mr. Strange is that one of the things I haven't heard talked about with sea level rise that scares me more than anything if there's 3 feet of sea level rise, isn't the groundwater going to come up at least 3 feet as well?
Yeah.
So you're going to have less freeboard from the ground level to...
If we were spraying on 5-foot land, I would be concerned. Yeah.
Okay. A question about if the city does not grant this, you sent me some information that you're actually going to decrease the capacity at Wolfneck from what it is now? Mm-hmm. And why is that?
Because we feel we want to be only spraying at agronomic rates. So that means right now we are allowed to spray at a much higher rate. You may not know that, but we have a permit for over 3 million gallons per day. Now we're proposing to cut that in half because we're seeking alternate outlets. What we're talking about today would be another alternate outlet, so we can spray less just at agronomic rates on the spray lands at the Wolfneck facility. That's in writing, you've seen it, we've communicated that to DNRC, they've certainly seen our numbers.
And at inland bays, do you expect, or are there any plans to use rapid infiltration basins? Our partners are already using rapid infiltration basins. We're sending 450,000 gallons daily to Artesian to be disposed of in rapid infiltration basins. But we are not seeking ourselves RIBs. And you don't have any intent to?
We do not intend to. Okay.
Because the mayor doesn't want comments, but I have a comment on that. I guess a question for Gina then.
No, if I may say something. Our Artesian partners, they will continue to expand their RIBs. So They are a rib-based, they
Well, I
believe.
think ribs are the worst possible alternative. Oh,
So, but you and I both know that if you are spraying for ag, then you're looking at a nutrient uptake. If you're infiltrating for ribs, you're looking at low nitrogen numbers. So the two are incompatible, just like a methanol-treated denite filter is incompatible with a land treatment-based system based on nutrient uptake. So these are two inherent contradictions. That's why we chose to be a spray facility at inland bays and not a rib facility at inland bays.
okay. Gina? In relation to the $7.6 million, I'm trying to understand, where this money comes from and how it's used. So if what I'm hearing you say, because I want a real world scenario that I think might be possible, is if the city had a $13.1 million project at the plant that they wanted to do, they could use the $7.6 million for their share of it, and this county would come up with $5.5 million more to complete that project?
Correct. For the plant upgrades, we would still have to pay our portion. So if this is, 7.6 is completely outside this. So if there's more, like we were talking about that one slide, it was phase 3 and 4. If there's more upgrades coming, we still have to pay our portion.
But the
Going
city can
forward.
use the 7.6 for their
For
portion?
their portion, absolutely.
With no deduction for the fact
Correct.
that it, okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. There'll be an opportunity later to give opinions and perhaps even ask more questions. With that, again, we're going to finish who's in the room. Chris Basin, you have some questions or anything you'd like to pose?
No questions, and I can wait till the opinions section.
All right, we'll force you to stay here a little longer. Thank you very much. With that, we're going to go to those that have pre-registered to speak in the order of which they pre-registered. Suzanne Good, are you on jury duty or did you get off today?
Good afternoon. The acoustics are okay?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Suzanne.
Thank you. So I'll limit myself to questions as you requested. My first question is I'm sort of on board with the county engineer's unwillingness to prognosticate beyond about 20 years. That seems, economists would probably agree with that. But I'm a little concerned about this belief that perhaps maybe some census data or something else has led to that. At least I understand him to have said that the southern planning area, let's call that Bethany, Millville, is perceived to be growing faster than the northern planning area, which includes, say, Rehoboth and Lewis, among other places. But certainly we'd all probably agree that the northern planning area is growing rapidly and steadily. And as proof of that, I cite the fact that the recently opened Aldi chose to locate in Rehoboth Beach rather than, say, in Millville or Selveville. That's not proof positive, but it's something. So I'm a little concerned we're not taking into account the likely growth of the Rehoboth Beach wastewater treatment plant service area, which I think still has, legs to grow. So I want to be conservative. As you've probably seen from my correspondence, my main concern continues to be Rehoboth Beach, in essence, rescuing a larger area of the county which surrounds it. We have in the past, in the 80s, worked with, of course, a lot of surrounding areas, and we appreciate all the cost sharing and cooperation that has taken place, but I'm very concerned about this for reasons I've set forth in writing. My second question centers on, I've gotten conflicting data. I was looking at a Cape Gazette, an excellent Cape Gazette article from around 2015, which actually included a video tour or link to a video tour of the South Coastal plant in Frankfort, Delaware, a little bit west of Bethany. And in that article, which seemed very well researched by the Cape Gazette, they mentioned that the South Coastal pipe goes 2 miles offshore. Whereas I was fortunate to have confirmed by the engineer who's been speaking to us that a lot of you know that our Rehoboth Beach pipe is 6,000 feet long, and the effective part of it that's not on Deauville Beach is probably about 80 feet long, so about a mile out. So I'd like someone to maybe confirm that the 2-mile length of South Coastal, which puts the effluent twice as far away from the shore, whether that's correct or not. My third question, I've touched on in some of my correspondence. I'm a little concerned, I'm learning, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems that Wolfneck already sends some of the effluent generated in its nearby area to the Lewis wastewater treatment plant on American Legion Road. So there's already a partnership with the town of Lewis. Many of you know that plant has had recurring problems, struggling with treatment and everything else. So I'm wondering whether how much the county has pursued, whether it makes more sense to partner more fully with Lewis, including possibly building another outfall in the vicinity of the town of Lewis. My whole goal with that is to spread the risk, because anytime a ship's anchor, say, were to get caught in an outfall or other catastrophes happen with, it's better to plan in advance. So that would be, I'd like to hear either the county administrator or the engineer or anyone else talk about how much the Lewis partnership has been pursued, especially since there already is some connection between Lewis and Wolfneck. And my fourth and last question centers on my concern that reassuring us that somehow this might be beneficial, because in the event of, say, hurricane, another Sandy or other storm, that this bi-directional connection might be able to bail the struggling Rehoboth Beach wastewater treatment plant on Roosevelt Street out. I'm just concerned as to whether that would really happen, given that on October 29th, when we had that unfortunate leak into the marshland and the ground. Now, there was construction going on that is probably the main cause of that accident. But still, the one time there could have been bi-directional bailing out by Wolfneck, since the pipe has been operational since April or May of 2021, which sends up to about 400,000 gallons per day of untreated wastewater, which is then processed by the Rehoboth Beach plant and then goes into the outfall with everything else. Why we're so confident this would really work in the way it's intended and designed. So that would be my last question. I have appreciated the detailed presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzanne. So there are 4 questions there. Test your memory. If Rehoboth, you need to pass the Rehoboth on anything, let us know. Go ahead.
Sure. We'll Mr. Medlars and I will try to attempt to answer these. I'm going to answer the first one related to the growth and the growth prediction. The county issues building permits throughout our geographical area, and in some areas along inside city limits as well. So we monitor growth activity almost down to the tax parcel. And I can tell you that the south planning area, which consists of south of the inlet and Ocean View, Millville area in particular, which is also the South Coastal Sewer area, is all of our planning and all of our historical data. That is where the most growth is taking place. In fact, it's 2-to-1 on sewer connections with our on the county sewer connections. It's 2-to-1 south planning area versus north planning area. I'm going to ask Mr. Medlars to answer the pipe length question.
I believe Ms. Good asked this question for the record because we discussed that today. So let me, for the record, clarify. Both outfalls are within a few feet of each other, lengthwise. I did look at our as-bills, and we are just beyond the 6,000 foot mark. And so I would say, give or take a couple hundred feet is the length of pipe. So that was that one. The other one is the Lewis. Let me start with the West Rehoboth connection question first. It was and your public works director, Mr. Williams, explained it very eloquently at the last meeting. It was rapidly resolved. It was so fast resolved that the request did not even make it to Sussex County to take some of the flow over to West Rehoboth and to Wolfneck. To make that switch, not going to the Rehoboth plant, but going back to the Wolfneck plant, including additional flow, it would take a couple of hours because there's a series of valves which have to be turned in a certain sequence, because if we don't get the sequence right, bad things happen beyond just what happened at the treatment plant. So we have a mode of operations, we can do this, which can be activated upon the city's request. The Lewis flow does not have that luxury. As a matter of fact, Ms. Good referred to an incident I am very familiar with around Christmas time. And we did receive a call from the Lewis Board of Public Works about the upgrade to a bidirectional flow capability. And even with the pumps and pipes, even with the pumps and hoses we had available, we could have not implemented that within days. It would have taken us a couple of weeks to get that all set up and secure to make it operational on a temporary basis. So at that point, the repair to the Lewis facility, again, was faster than a temporary setup of the county to pump it backwards. And that has to do with the fact that the Lewis connection on the Gills Neck Road from the railroad tracks to the pump station by the bridge is a gravity connection, not a pressure connection. So you cannot readily reverse it. However, the Lewis Board of Public Works is considering to increase that option and make it permanently bidirectional. But that, again, that is a decision by the board, not by the county.
All right. Thank you very much, Hans and Todd. Appreciate it. We'll go to that next member of the public. Donna Mabry, are you online?
Susan Good was the only person online.
Okay, so Jennifer Duncan and Rick Perry none of them are online. Okay, very good. With that, I want to go back to the commissioners. I'll give them one last chance before we then move on to city staff. I would actually like to start, Hans or Todd, if you all went to DENREC and had a private meeting with them. Do you have any comment on us being able to do that? I think we would probably like our session with DENREC. Do you have any concerns about that or problems or?
Thank you, Mayor. Absolutely no concerns. Would encourage you to make outreach to the agency to discuss some of the parameters that we've talked about today, specific to our option request. And I would say I was in the meeting, the first meeting, the political meeting, as Hans referenced it. That was a meeting where certain people in the agency don't want to read about these types of things in the newspaper. They need to hear about it first directly from officials like myself, Mr. Medlars, and Council President Vincent. So we paid a courtesy visit to the agency to discuss what we were considering at a very high level, just to say that we're going to approach the city and discuss these options. So that was the first meeting. There have been technical conversations with those that understand the technical world better than I, but I would encourage the city by all means to discuss that with the agency.
Very good, thank you. Any further questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Sharp, please.
I just have one what I hope is not a really elementary question, but it may very well be. For constituents who are not very well informed about this and are certainly at this time of year not following it, what is the answer to the question, why is Rehoboth preferred over Wolfneck or the inland bays? Is it as simple as financial?
Great question. Excellent question. Probably one of the most important questions. The answer is fairly simple. The option of coming to Rehoboth provides the county better flexibility in the ability to get rid of treated wastewater. And for all the reasons that we've discussed, sea level rise being one of them, the ability to spray on a converted Wolfneck facility, which eventually, with the right permits, are going to be sprayed on trees at a reduced spray amount. These changes in our operations present an opportunity for us to spray at Wolfeneck at a lower rate if we have other options. One of those options includes coming to Rehoboth. Other options, as was referenced in the November meeting, include taking that water to inland bays. We do have a 10-mile pipe that connects the West Rehoboth system to our inland bays facility, so we can do that today. We're doing that today. So that is part of our decision-making process and what to do at the inland bays plant. However, for all the things that we've discussed today, the option of going through the outfall presents the best use, in our opinion, and would be the preferred choice by the county.
Thank you, Todd. Anything else, Commissioner Sharp?
No.
Anything else from the commissioners? Hearing none, want to thank all the county representatives. You're welcome to stay around. In fact, it might be preferred in case we have any additional questions from you that crop up. With that, we're going to go to the next step in this meeting, and that's to allow city staff any follow-up questions remaining from our first meeting. Have we prepared anything formally? No. Do you have any questions that you don't have anything you want to present? Are there any questions, additional questions from the commissioners for the city staff that we can research? I've got Commissioner Sharp first.
I just recall from our last meeting, I believe it was Suzanne Good who asked about if a referendum should be called in this case, since it appears that the usage of the outfall would be changing. And I wonder if we have taken that under advisement yet and have gotten an answer.
Commissioner, I've not really looked into that. I mean, typically our referendum questions, our recall questions are in the context of zoning. This obviously could be a referendum question. You as commissioners do have the authority to make these decisions, but it is an option.
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking is I did see some language in the original referendum, and I understand what you're trying to tell me, but the original language spoke of nothing other than the outfall for Rehoboth Beach. So I guess what you're telling me, City Solicitor, is we would have the flexibility then to discuss whether or not a referendum would be appropriate or inappropriate?
Well, excuse me, was that, test your memory, Commissioner, was that referendum in reference to the ability to borrow?
I believe so. Wasn't that the only referendum we had?
It's the only one I recall, Commissioner, with regard to wastewater disposal, I think, was the borrowing referendum.
Okay, well, maybe we could just shore that up for clarity, because if we've got one very well-informed resident who's asking it, I suspect it's going to come again from many others. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll put that on our list to dos. Any other commissioners? Commissioner, again, this is a session for questions and answers from city staff. I wanted to do that and then go to the public, see if they had any questions for city staff. If the desire is there just to go right into commissioner discussion, then that can certainly happen. Commissioner Sharnowski and then Commissioner Gay.
Mayor, I've got I've got nothing for the city staff. My only comment was directed to Commissioner Sharps. The only referendums we had were the ability to borrow funds. That was the only reason for the referendums, and so it's my thought that one would not be required for this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gay?
Yes, thanks. And I appreciate Commissioner Sharp bringing this up because several constituents had asked me about it as well. And so I went back and looked it up. And of course, the format for any referendum is for or against. That's just the prescribed format for anything. And of course, yes, it was about the borrowing. However, the public notices that preceded all of the hearings about the outfall, and certainly the notices that preceded the referendum vote itself, contained a paragraph about what was being voted on. And it does say in that it is for the construction of an outfall for the treated effluent from the city's wastewater treatment plant. It does say that specifically. So I just throw that out there. And as I say, a number of people have basically said, this was an underlying assumption. In other words, people voted on it because we would be retaining control over the effluent that goes out to the ocean. So that's part of their concern today.
Thank you. Commissioner Gossett?
Just a couple of points. I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, the only time a referendum can be brought forth by the mayor and commissioners is during the next regularly scheduled election. So that would be next August for that purpose, if I'm remembering correctly. There was also a question about the payment. Would be a one-time payment. I just got a specific response, but has there been discussions among the city manager and staff about how that payment would be utilized within the city?
Good afternoon, commissioners. The question's been bantered.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
I can't hear you.
The question's been bantered about, but nothing really specific. Whatever would be recommended would be brought forward to the commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments?
Well, just a comment. Will the slideshow that was presented today be posted on the web?
Yeah, I said earlier that the October 5th documents will be posted on the web as well as the county presentation. We'll get on there also. And that will be in the portal under the folder for Sussex County Initiative. Also, what's already on there is the city's presentation of the county initiative dated November and presented November 4th. And then also you'll find on that portal under that same tab, an additional tab for public correspondence that lists all the communications received to date by our constituents and others. I want to go back. I'd like to give the public one more chance to offer opinion and comment or any questions of the city staff. And then I would like to turn to the commissioners for a discussion of where they want to go and what their opinions are. So let's start again with Walter Brittingham. Those in the room, no. Mike Strange.
Yes, I would just like to offer three.
Check and
It's
see
on.
if that's.
It's on.
Yeah.
I would just like to offer three comments. One is with regard to the price that's been offered is an accounting value. And there are many forms of value, and accounting is always the lowest. And you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate for. And I think you have an offer, but it's far from what the ultimate negotiated value should be. That's one. Two, I agree that most engineers hate doing long-range forecasting, and they try to limit it to 20 or less, and if they could get away with it, they'd limit it to the next budget cycle. But I'm also a professional engineer, and I spent my career working in long-range planning, And we have to look at this asset over its entire life value, which now has roughly 69 to 70 years left. And look at it in the context of that and the value to Rehoboth Beach, and also the utility value of it and how it may or may not impact if we allocate the 2 million gallons per day to the roughly 69 years that are left. I agree fully as you get further out from time-based zero, the forecasts become less and less reliable, and that's why it's incumbent upon all of us to do resilient planning, which basically is the philosophy that says you look at the dimensions of the situation and you try to do an evaluation based on what might happen or could happen, and the decisions you make in the short term, although you may only make small decisions, they accumulate up to basically resulting in a very resilient and robust solution. So from that standpoint, and when I did my analysis based on the best engineering that I could do with the knowledge that I have and what was contributed in the public workshop so far, is I came up with 1 MGD as being a safe approach. And the further you got to 2, it got more risky. Ultimately, that's a decision that the commissioners are going to have to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Mayor Sam Cooper. And this is again an opportunity to ask any additional questions or
Yeah, I have a
share
question.
your opinions.
Oh, excuse me. A question, I guess it could be for the city staff, but the permit right now says waste loading of 15 parts per million of TSS and BOD times 3.4 million is how many pounds per day? 425. So in the modified permit that the city would be receiving, are we going to continue to have the 15 and cut the 425 by 40%? Or are we going to cut the 15 to 10?
We would be
Microphone there.
For the previous presentation, I think we were, we had the 425, so we were going to allocate 2/5 to the county of the 425 and 3/5 to the city. And we were going to stick with we were going to go to the DNREC with a BOD limit of, on a concentration basis of 10 milligrams.
Could you speak up, please?
A BOD limit of 10 milligrams per liter suspended solids and BOD on our average basis, and we would go to them with a recommendation for 20 milligrams per liter on a peak day or a max day situation for both BOD and TSS.
Well, why would you, if the 425 number is the penultimate number, you don't, the state don't want you to see, why wouldn't you stay with 15? It seems like you'd have more flexibility.
Go ahead, Hans, you were.
Sam, both of these are possible scenarios because they have the same outcome. So if the city is going to have discussions with the department, so we're very comfortable with the 10 ppm approach. If you're more comfortable with the 15 and the lesser pounds, the end result is the same.
Okay, I just,
No, that's perfect. It's perfectly.
I think it's more protection to the city. You get into violation not as quickly as if you might.
You remember the average?
If you have a low flow, but a higher concentration, you could be in violation at 10 that you wouldn't be at 15.
If the average,
Wintertime, say.
you may recall that the average is defined as the monthly average. So if you were dealing with a weekly average, which I've seen permits written around a weekly average, I would be much more concerned about your statement. But because we're dealing with a monthly average permit, if you can't meet that pound number in an entire month, you probably have a bigger root problem. But it is.
All is I always look for ways to get the most flexibility and the least impact to the city.
Mr. Cooper's right. It gives you more flexibility. When we discussed it with the DNREC technical team, it was more like, let's put forward something the public can readily understand. There's a reduction in concentration. which means both facilities feel comfortable that they can perform at that level. So it has as much to do with the perception as it does have with reality. There's no intention to not meet the 10.
No question, but,
So,
well, okay. I mean, I come back to South Coastal. Why didn't you just say, we're going to, live within the permit we've got, reduce, well, anyway, that's, thank you. I guess my comments, are that, I think ocean outfall is a perfectly acceptable and even preferred in a lot of cases solution. I have no problem with the county using the outfall. I do have a problem with carving up the city's permit. I think there's danger in that, and I don't see any real reason to do that. I think Mr. Medlar's statement that the county wants to apply the wastewater at the agronomic rate is a pipe dream at best. When we were deep and heavy into this, I looked into this, and like a corn crop, it's about 100-day a year for a corn. And in the early stages of it, the nitrogen uptake is near zero. And it slowly builds, and then it peaks, and then it falls off near the end of the crop. So, when you've got wastewater 365 days a year, to me, the land application is disposing of dumping the wastewater on the land. It's not, it can be, ideally, I think you'd have a huge lagoon for the treated effluent and have a pipe that went all over the county, and farmers would turn it on when they wanted it, and it would come down. But that's not where we're at. And my fear is that I think, as I said before, that the RIBS, which some of the county's wastewater apparently is the worst alternative there is. I think they will be the environmental disaster in another 20 years. And to the extent that the city can help in preventing wastewater to going to RIBS, I think is highly preferred. Now, obviously, the city has no hand in that, in the sense of they can't prohibit it. But as far as the actual disposal, I think the ocean outfall is time-tested, it's reliable, and absent a major problem with an anchor hitting or something, it's there. It doesn't rely on the weather. It doesn't rely on a lot of things. And I can understand the counties wanting to use it, but I am not in favor of carving up our permit to give them capacity in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Chris Basin, please. If you want to be on camera for your folks there, go ahead, Chris, and tell us who you're associated with, too.
I'm Chris Basin. I'm the executive director with the Delaware Center for the Inland Bays. We're a nonprofit organization, and we're responsible for the protection and restoration of these very economically and ecologically important estuaries. And we do that by implementing a long-term management plan. It's called the Inland Bays Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan. The county, and via the Sussex County Association of Towns, Rehoboth is involved in that, and both the county and the Sussex County Association of Towns are signatories to that plan. And both the county and the town have been key players in our efforts to restore the bays. And after 25 years of effort, we've had some real improvements in water quality. We've seen significant progress in cleaning up the bays. The water in the bays is a lot clearer now. It's got less nutrients in it. It's got less seaweed in it. It's got less algae in it. And that's because of the power of partnerships between folks like the county and the city of Rehoboth. However, in the last 5 years that we have data for, we have seen a stalling of progress in restoring water quality to the bays. And looking further, when we look at the loads of nutrients that are coming into the bays from the lands of the watershed, we have not seen any progress in those particular loads over 20, 25 years. It is a real stubborn problem that we are facing. And in fact, in one of our watersheds, the Little Asselman Bay watershed, we are actually seeing increases in phosphorus loading to that bay, which is threatening the particular progress that we've seen in that area. Climate change is having an increasing effect on the water quality in the bays. And I believe that that is something that we saw this year when we had a record number of fish kills in our bays. We had 15 total fish kills. Over almost 2 million fish died. Most of that's due to low dissolved oxygen from pollution. But the heat is having an increasing bearing on that, I believe. So that's an indicator that we are really facing extraordinary challenges in managing our water. And it's not just the heat, but it's the intensifying rainfall, it's the increase in population. When Rehoboth conducted their alternatives analysis for removing its wastewater discharge from the canal, the ocean outfall was the clear choice based on the science. And it very simply allows the nutrients in the wastewater that would otherwise be applied to the land and eventually seep through the aquifers in the bays. It allows all that to bypass the inland bays and go into the ocean, where it is very rapidly diluted, resulting in a minimal environmental impact. The lands of the Wolfneck wastewater treatment plant are the perfect coastal conservation area. When you look at it for a map, it's just an amazing site. It's not the best place to put wastewater, but history has determined why we're doing that right now. And all credit goes to the county for, number one, doing a great creative job of dealing with that situation as it is and proposing a very unique and creative approach to reforesting Wolfneck, but also for this proposal, which would take much of that wastewater and use the capacity through the ocean outfall to reduce the environmental impact. So this is a wonderful opportunity, and I want to encourage the very strong partnership between the city and the county to grow and continue. It will have benefits not just for these two entities, but for all the people that use and love the inland bays and the economy that is built around those bays. So I think in my tenure, when I've seen something work really well for water quality, whether it's a restoration project or science or monitoring, it comes from the power of partnerships. And I just wanted to thank everyone for the opportunity to address you on that and encourage that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you being here. Next person registered to speak is Suzanne Good. Do you have any further opinions or comments or questions you'd like to share?
Yes, good afternoon, especially in light of what this gentleman named Chris, I guess I take it with the inland bays, has just mentioned. I would like to say that, of course, all I and everyone else is concerned that the spray irrigation, either on agricultural land or this proposed woodland project, which has not yet been undertaken, as is my understanding, we're all concerned about the contamination of the water supply. And while I appreciate the inland bays emphasizing that this is some wonderful solution to protect the bays, which, and there does seem to be this stalling, which probably reflects the very high growth rate of the population at the time when only some of the treated effluent was being taken to the fairly new Rehoboth Beach outfall. I actually think what Chris just stated is another reason to consider very seriously that the town of Lewis, which continues to discharge into the canal toward I think the Roosevelt Inlet and then onto the bay, that to me is the perfect partnership to construct another ocean outfall, if indeed this is such a wonderful solution, between Wolfneck and the town of Lewis. But before Chris spoke, my two comments were that, yes, I appreciate that Commissioner Gay took the time to research what was exactly involved leading up to the referendum to approve the city borrowing this huge sum of money to finance the outfall. But yes, there was an understanding that the outfall would only carry effluent which had been treated by the Rehoboth Beach wastewater treatment plant. Whereas this new proposal by the county would involve Wolfneck upgrading its own facility to treat the effluent to a more pure level to join up with the outfall at a proposed tie-in somewhere under the probably Route 1 overpass, but that is a very different use when Rehoboth Beach's wastewater treatment plant is not the sole source of the treated effluent going into our outfall. I also had the pleasure of speaking to engineer Medzar this morning, and I learned something from him which totally surprised me. I was aware that the Wolfneck service area was somewhat seasonal because a lot of the houses, for instance, near Route 1 in Rehoboth Beach, for sure, show higher occupancy rates in the summer season than in the winter. But I wouldn't have thought it was as seasonal as in town Rehoboth Beach. Well, the county engineer explained to me, because they have recent numbers for what West Rehoboth is sending us in the off season, it turns out they are just as seasonal as we are. So the peak flow of Wolfneck may in fact be pretty similar to our peak flow period, which is basically May to September. So that is another reason for me to be concerned that the volume flowing from this proposed 2 million gallons a day from Wolfneck will just continue to possibly, push up against the 2 million gallons per day and need continued requests for increasing that. So other than that, I just continue to feel that we have partnered since the 80s with nearby areas. We have enjoyed a lot of helpful financing and consulting, probably consulting expertise from the county. But I don't think, based on what's happened in the world, it's very rare, except for very poor, distressed countries, for instance, to accept the sewage generation, the sewage that's generated by other regions or areas. So I'm uncomfortable with this proposal on the face of it because of how it has Rehoboth Beach handling the refuse in effect from other areas. So in that context, I'm very concerned about this becoming an increasing and continuing relationship. And if I had to, and since we're being pressured to make this decision, potentially as soon as December 31st, 2021, I would absolutely not be on board for it. Anyway, that's how I'm feeling, and I don't see myself changing my mind so readily. Thank you very much, and best of luck. Best of luck with this thorny issue.
Thank you, Suzanne. I want to clarify, it's been mentioned twice tonight that the December 31st deadline was mentioned at a previous meeting and is not applicable at this point. That while I'm sure they would like to have a response by then, they're anxious to have something by the first quarter of 2022. With that, that closes our public portion of comment. They've had a couple opportunities. And we actually put the public comment in front of discussion by the commissioners. So I'd like to go back to the commissioners and see if you have any opinions. I'd also like comment on what you see as the next steps. We certainly don't need to carry this any further if we don't want, but we have to decide at what point we might choose to do that. Otherwise, perhaps at the next meeting, which is to be determined, we can get the staff, I think as Commissioner Sharp or somebody asked for a pros and cons analysis that we could get from city staff. That would probably be a good idea so that it can be a foundation for discussion at the next meeting that we can then, commissioners can then feed and add on to. I have three hands up, Commissioners Srnowski, Gossett, and Legree. I think they might be leftovers from before. So you want to let me know, do any of you want to, does anybody want to say anything? Commissioner Legree, unmute yourself. Go ahead.
I want to hear from DENREC whether or not we're ever going to see an increase or decrease in the poundage of our waste allocation. My suspicion right now is they might have told the county that 425 is as low as or as high as we're ever going to go. I'd like to hear that from the words of DENREC. Former Mayor Cooper said the most flexibility and the least risk when he discussed the permit and the future. I would say that the most flexibility and the least risk is to not share or sell part of our permit. The safest thing for us to do is to keep our permit. I would like to ask DENREC if that would be possible, if they would allow us to have an agreement to for services to the county for 2 million gallon a day or whatever's determined, and have the permit continue to be solely in our name. I would like to ask DENREC if they see a change, either an increase or a decrease in the nutrient allocation that's coming down the road. We heard the Center for Inland Base fellow talk about nutrient allocation. Well, it's possible to have too many nutrients in the ocean, although it's a lot more difficult. But I would like to know if DENREC thinks that their day might come when they'll say, you people need to start counting your nitrates, or you people need to start talking about precipitating out your phosphates, or you people need to think about why there is not enough or too much iron. Those are all considerations. Yes, it's 6,000 feet out in the ocean. And yes, the currents disperse the dissociation within less than 100 feet. And that's really safe. And the plankton out there really need those nutrients. But I'd like to ask DENREC if they ever visualize a problem coming up whereby they, maybe because of political reasons, they have to say, folks, you're going to have to start counting your nutrients. Or they say, no, we're not going to take out that observation out of your permit. And we heard Sussex County say, if that observation that we had for nutrient load is not removed, they cannot go forward. I'd like to know just where we stand on that, and I'd like to hear it from DENREC. We talked a little bit about a referendum. What actually has to happen for us to put enough people together to force a referendum? Is it something that's not possible, or is it possible for a petition to be circulated? And I would love to see us vote on this. The citizens of Rehoboth would make me feel a lot better. I don't have any problems with the numbers because I'm happy with 7.6, but there are a lot of people who contacted me. One lady said, that's not any more than 3 houses on Prospect Street. And damn, she's right. But anyway, I don't have a problem with the money, but other people do. And that might come out in a referendum or some way we could get together and vote on this. I remember the town hall that we had a couple of years ago when the former administration was going to transfer the ownership of our wastewater treatment system to the county. Yeah, I have those questions, and I'd like to ask the county point blank before we step forward. Would you not go forward if we decided not to share or sell a portion of our referendum? Thanks, Mayor.
Of our referendum. Thank you. I think if you could, it would help me to receive your questions for DENREC, Jay. Please send them up.
You mean to repeat them, or would you like for me to write it out and send it to you? I can do either.
Yes,
Post it.
yes. I'd like to have them written out so that that
Okay.
are articulated by you. In terms of the referendum, I think we addressed that earlier and incompletely, but I think we concluded with that, yes, in a future agenda, we can have a better explanation of the possibilities and the needs and the requirements to conduct referendums.
I can mention, Mayor, that I did take a moment while we've been sitting here just to review the charter, and I kind of recall that there isn't a general referendum provision, that the charter provides a process for referendums and borrowings. Certain borrowings actually require it. The referendum process in annexations, and then a referendum process when there's a recall of an ordinance that's been passed by the voters. So, I suspect there's some process you could go through to put a question such as this to the voters, but there isn't a specific procedure set out in our charter for this sort of a referendum of question.
Thank you, Glenn. Commissioner Gossett, your hand raised?
Yes, just one follow-up, and you had mentioned that of another commissioner's, I believe Commissioner Sharp asked for a pros and cons evaluation of this, and to be included in that, a question I had posed along with that I hope would be addressed in a written format is the advantages of the city to a one-time purchase over a long-term contract and vice versa. As we have a long-term biosolids contract, this is obviously a different approach from the county and a one-time purchase. So again, is the pros and cons that Commissioner Sharp had asked for. I would just like a written evaluation as to the advantages of a one-time purchase versus a long-term contract, possibly going along with each 5 years when the NDS permit is renewed. Thank you.
Thank you. And that reminds me of a question also. I think, Glenn, you're going to research the difference between selling capacity versus leasing capacity. I think one of the commissioners had that. So we'll add that to our lease, our questions. With that, we'll go to Commissioner Gay. You're muted.
Yeah, just trying to sort of close out this referendum question. I have a question for the city solicitor. That in addition to the areas you named, I think there's a provision in there that we have the option to put an ordinance to referendum rather than waiting to see if people object. However, it's an ordinance specifically, and I guess I wonder, would this be an ordinance? Would this deal constitute an ordinance or have an ordinance associated with it? Because it seems like that's the test as to whether or not it's an ordinance or not. Whether it could actually be put to referendum. If it is an ordinance and we can't do it, then as Commissioner Legree just pointed out, the citizens can force it with a petition, right? But it still has to be an ordinance.
So I'm familiar with that provision, and it does relate to an ordinance, and it's typically when the voters want to challenge an ordinance that the commissioners have adopted. So that provision, I think, is specifically related to the challenge to an ordinance. The commissioners act by ordinance or by resolution. The form, typically in a vote like this, it's not put in the form of an ordinance. I suppose it could be. Those are all options we need to talk through.
Okay, yeah, that's I guess the key question is, would it even be an ordinance? And I guess the other thing that I didn't think to ask earlier is this I understand we're looking at lease versus purchase. That's a really big question. But also, is this an all or nothing deal? Is it 2 million or don't do it? Or can we specify something that works better for us if it turns out that that's an option, that we find something that does work better for us?
You want to answer Commissioner Gay's question, and then if you don't mind, we'll go back to Commissioner Legree's last question and put you on the spot there too. Commissioner Gay, just reiterate your question, please.
I'm just wondering if this is, aside from the fact that we are talking about still discussing purchase versus lease, but are other elements of this plan an all or nothing deal? Is it 2 million gallons or nothing? Or if during the process of either discussing things with DNREC or among ourselves, we come up with a different number, is that a possibility as well?
Commissioner Gay, the economy of scale will not allow a 1 million gallon per day arrangement because the downsizing of the asset does not correspond to the cost. So we kicked around anything between 1 3/4 and 2 1/4. We settled for 2. So Would we be interested in 1.25? Yes. Would we be interested in 1? No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
That's all I have.
Jay, do you want to re-ask your last question for the county, please? You're muted. You're muted.
If DNREC tells us that we don't have to share our permit if we don't want to, or they don't have to make another separate permit for the county, that this is this would be up to us when we negotiate our new permit. Would the county back out and build a 16-mile pipeline to South Coastal and consider this one and done? And just to repeat my 2 questions I want to ask DNREC. Number 1, would you ever consider lowering our total load that we're allowed? And number 2, can you ever see a time when you'll ask us to measure our nutrients? Thanks, Mayor.
Do you want to offer any responses?
You know, like, you have to understand how the regulatory process works. A definite answer by the department can only be given to a real application filed, whether that's a permit modification application or a new application. You cannot expect a regulator to answer a prospective question in the affirmative or the negative. It is only possible if you go through the steps outlined in the regulations. So that's why, you know, like, you can't just set up a meeting and get an answer on this unless you're willing, ready, and able to make a full-blown permit application. So hence, the county's offer was always tied to permit issuance. We are fully aware that we could spend 2 years and a lot of money going through the process to get a no answer. So we are aware of that risk. If you can shortcut that, Commissioner, and get us an answer with your 1 meeting, we would have to be extremely thankful to you, because that would take a lot of risk out on our side. But just sort of give you a flair for the regulatory process. Don't be disappointed when you come away with not an answer.
Thank you, Hans. Any additional commissioner comments? If not, I'd like to seek what the next step is. I would suggest that since we have some additional homework to do, which includes evaluating pros and cons by the staff perspective, looking at the advantages of one-time purchase versus multiple payments, and lease versus purchase, plus anything else that cropped up today, that those could be at a future meeting, time to be determined. I don't know whether I can squeeze it in at the December 6th workshop or not, but that might be appropriate since we've got multiple holidays coming up that kind of make it difficult to schedule independent meetings. Are there any further comments? Commissioner Gay, did you?
Yeah, I took my hand down because I thought, well, maybe I won't ask this, but since you saw it up, I'll go ahead and say that I think
Okay.
Even though all these meetings are public, I get that, and we've had some good interactions from the public so far, but we also, each time we get a lot more detailed information, and I can't expect people. I think Commissioner Sharp mentioned earlier that people are off. This is the time of year when they're off doing other things. At some point in the process, I think we're going to need several detailed communications for the public, a Q&A on all the sort of meaty questions they're asking, a town hall. I just think that's going to be necessary. I don't know when it's going to be necessary, but I don't think we can keep feeding the public in bits and pieces of these meetings. We can certainly educate ourselves that way, but I think at some point we have to have a comprehensive output to the public on all of this.
Thank you. Commissioner Shranowski?
Yeah, Mayor, I just want to comment. I'm having a difficult time here identifying the cons, identifying the what could be adversely affect the city here. We've heard from every expert that is saying that we are not anywhere close to capacity or the outfall limits. And in 50 years, we're never going to be close to that number. And we've talked about a lot of development projects, and none of them would even move the needle on it. So I'm struggling to identify, and I agree. I would prefer lease over purchase. I would prefer to have it not in perpetuity, but have some sort of timed agreement. We should remain continue to have complete control over it. But I'm having trouble identifying why we shouldn't move forward in this partnership with the county. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for us and for our taxpayers. And like I said in the first meeting, which it was an executive session, so the public didn't hear me say this, but that 7.6 for me was a starting point to negotiate. Other costs have been identified, such as putting the two-way valve so that we can, should we need to send some of our outfall to the holding tanks that the county has, we've got the ability to do that. I think, in part of the negotiating of this, that cost burden should be put on the county, and any other additional expenses that are going to come up. But besides negotiating those things, I don't see why we would not move forward with this, and struggling with why that is still a question.
Thank you, Commissioner. What I would, since we have another meeting coming up, date to be determined, we've already identified some things we want to work on. I would also solicit again from the commissioners any list of your questions that you have for the county or for city staff, so that we can try to address them the best we can and be prepared for the next meeting. And I would encourage members of the public to also communicate your questions and ideas and comments to us, so that we can file those and archive them on our city portal, and so that others can see them. Is there anything further from the county? You want to offer anything? You're good. Anything further from the commissioners? Anything further from the city staff that you would like to contribute? If not, I want to thank our partners, or the Hans Medlars, Todd Lawson, and Gina Jennings for being here representing the county, and for all those other members of the citizenry that were here. With that, I'll adjourn this meeting at 4:37 p.m. Thank you very much.